2 months ago, FIFA quietly cancelled up to 70% of the hotel rooms it had reserved across 16 World Cup host cities. 15,000 rooms in Vancouver alone, 2,000 in Philadelphia, 1,000 in Atlanta, and 800 in Mexico City, all released back to the market overnight. The hotels in those cities had spent years getting ready for those reservations, going through expensive renovations, hiring extra staff, and raising prices in some cases by 900%, all because FIFA's reservations made the demand look guaranteed. But that demand was never really there, and now, with kickoff weeks away, 80% of US hotels are reporting bookings below what they predicted. Kansas City is openly calling the World Cup a non-event, and Vancouver's June occupancy is down 20% compared to last June, which is to say, it's down compared to a normal summer with no tournament at all. 5 million tickets have been sold for this tournament, but the hotels in the cities hosting it are sitting half empty. In this video, I want to walk through how FIFA managed to break the North American hotel industry before a single match was played, and by the end, you'll see exactly where all those missing guests ended up, because someone in the hospitality business is having the biggest month of their entire existence. To understand how things got this bad, you first have to understand how good they were supposed to be. When FIFA awarded the 2026 World Cup to the United States, Canada, and Mexico, the reaction was enormous. 16 host cities, 3 countries, and for the first time in tournament history, 48 teams instead of 32. It was supposed to be the biggest World Cup ever attempted by a wide margin. The economic projections that came with that bid were massive: $30.5 billion in total economic output, $17 billion in GDP impact, and 185,000 new jobs created across the 3 countries. The US federal government committed $625 million in security funding by itself, just for the 11 American host cities. Cities responded to those projections the way you'd expect them to. They started spending. Atlanta committed a $120 million transportation bond to prepare the city for visitors. Toronto's World Cup budget started at $30 million and grew to $380 million. Houston is running a 39-day FIFA fan festival in East Downtown that can cost up to $1 million per day to operate. But the industry that prepared the most was the hotel industry. The American Hotel and Lodging Association had spent years getting ready for what was being described as a once-in-a-generation tourism event. Hotels across all 11 US host cities spent millions of dollars on renovations, hired extra staff, expanded their available room counts, added multilingual signage, and did everything they could to prepare. And the reason they did all of that is because FIFA showed up early and started booking thousands of rooms at a time, years in advance, in every single host city. To the hotels watching this happen, the demand looked already locked in, so they did what any business would do when demand looks guaranteed. They raised their prices, and they didn't raise them a little. In Mexico City, hotel prices rose by over 900% on match nights. One Marriott property near the Estadio Azteca that normally goes for $157 a night was listed at $3,882 for the night of the opener. That's a 2,300% increase on a single room. Vancouver became the most expensive host city in the entire tournament, with the average hotel room in the city going for nearly $900 a night. To put that into perspective, the baseline rate in Vancouver was around $330 before the tournament, meaning rates roughly tripled for the World Cup period. The contrast across cities was huge. Houston, the cheapest host city in the tournament, was charging only $205 a night, an 8% increase over its normal rate. The exact same World Cup, the exact same broadcast, and the same teams playing each other, but a Houston hotel room costs about 4 times less than a Vancouver one. The problem with all of this pricing is that it was built on a foundation that didn't actually exist. FIFA's room blocks were not real demand from fans. They were placeholders, reservations made in bulk years before the tournament, before FIFA had any real idea how many staff members, sponsors, media representatives, or hospitality guests would actually need rooms. The blocks were essentially inventory being held in reserve, and in March of 2026, FIFA quietly took those reserved rooms back. Between March and April, FIFA released somewhere between 70 and 80% of all the hotel rooms it had reserved back to the open market. All 16 host cities, roughly the same window. The British Columbia Hotel Association called the scale of the cancellations notable, which in hotel industry language is about as close as you can get to saying nobody in the business had ever seen anything like it before. Vancouver took the hardest hit. 15,000 room nights were cancelled in a single city. Philadelphia lost 2,000 rooms, Atlanta lost around 1,000, Mexico City lost 800, and those are just the cities where the local hotel associations actually disclosed the numbers publicly. The president of the Greater Toronto Hotel Association, Sarah Angle, said that before the FIFA blocks dropped, Toronto was actually seeing a 28% uptick in bookings for the tournament window. After the cancellations hit, that entire uptick vanished. Hotels went from expecting a record summer to watching their numbers fall off a cliff. In theory, the cancellations should have been good news for fans. Thousands of rooms suddenly became available right when people were starting to finalize their tournament trips. Prices should have started to come down. Booking sites should have lit up with new reservations. But neither of those things actually happened. The damage had already been done. Hotels had set their rates months earlier, back when the FIFA block still looked locked in, and by the time the rooms were released, fans had already seen those prices and given up. The Greater Toronto Hotel Association used the word disappointed to describe the situation. Vancouver's June bookings ended up dropping 20% compared to the same month the year before, which is to say 20% below a regular Vancouver summer with no World Cup at all. What that means in practice is that some host cities are now actually less busy this June than they would have been if FIFA had simply chosen a different country to host, and the hotels in those cities have already spent the millions of dollars getting ready. But the most interesting part of this story isn't the empty rooms themselves, it's which cities got hit hardest, because once you start looking at the data city by city, a pattern starts to show up that's hard to ignore. Let me walk through the cities one by one, because the numbers really are worse than you'd expect. In Kansas City, between 85 and 90% of surveyed hotels are reporting their booking pace below expectations. Local short-term rental operators have basically given up. One of them told CBC he had tripled his prices on match nights and gone 6 straight weeks without a single new reservation, and his exact words about the situation were that it had been terrible. New York is supposed to be the crown jewel of the entire tournament, since it's hosting the final at MetLife Stadium, but 2/3 of the hotel owners surveyed there are reporting bookings softer than they expected. As of April, NYC hotels were only 18% booked for the June and July tournament window. At the same point the previous year, with no World Cup happening, they were at 26%. So the biggest sporting event in human history is actually making New York hotels emptier than a quiet, ordinary summer would have been. Jay Beatty, a hotel sales director in Seattle, summed up the problem in 5 words. What is the rate? That's it. That's the whole crisis in one sentence. The rate scared everyone off before they even got to the booking page. Boston, Philadelphia, San Francisco, and Seattle all tell the same story. Nearly 80% of hotel operators in those 4 cities are tracking behind their forecasts, and in some neighborhoods, they're tracking behind a normal summer. Dallas and Houston tell a stranger story. About 70% of hotels in both cities are reporting bookings below their World Cup expectations, but those same hotels say their bookings are basically in line with what a typical June would normally look like for them. What that means is that the World Cup is delivering essentially no extra business to Texas hotel chains. The tournament that was supposed to be the financial event of a generation is, for these hotels, indistinguishable from a regular summer. But the short-term rental data for those same Texas cities tells a completely different story. I'll come back to that. The only 2 real bright spots for the hotel industry are Miami and Atlanta. In Miami, about 55% of hotels report being on track or ahead of expectations, and in Atlanta, the number is closer to 50%, helped along by national team base camps being located there and the city's strong airport connections. So out of 11 US host cities, 5 are deeply underwater, 4 are flat, and only 2 are actually doing well. That is the great hospitality boom of 2026, which raises an obvious question. If 5 million tickets have been sold and hotels in the host cities are sitting this empty, where are all the fans actually staying? Before we get to where they went, it's worth asking why fans didn't just rebook at hotels once FIFA released all those rooms. The answer is that most fans never even got to the hotel question. They were knocked out at an earlier stage entirely. The first thing that knocked them out is the tickets. FIFA used dynamic pricing for the first time at a World Cup this year, which essentially means surge pricing for soccer matches, similar to how Uber raises fares during high-demand periods. The Guardian put it bluntly. Fans with normal bank balances had already been knocked out of the competition before it even started, thanks to FIFA's new pricing system. And when you compare ticket prices to the last World Cup in Qatar 2022, the increases are pretty hard to defend. The cheapest internationally available group stage ticket in Qatar was $69, and the same kind of ticket today is around $100. The cheapest final ticket international fans could buy in Qatar was $604, and today that same kind of ticket is $2,030. The top-tier final tickets used to cost $1,600 in Qatar, and today they are listed at just under $11,000 at MetLife Stadium. And on top of that, on the FIFA resale market, where most international fans actually end up buying their tickets, FIFA takes a 15% cut from the buyer and another 15% cut from the seller on the exact same transaction. When fans pushed back publicly, FIFA president Gianni Infantino defended the pricing by pointing to demand. He said FIFA had received 150 million ticket requests, enough to fill 300 years of World Cups. But fan advocates pushed back hard. Ronan Evan pointed out that the gap between what fans sitting in the exact same section are paying is enormous, and that having high demand doesn't justify pricing out the average person. The gap between what FIFA is charging and what fans can actually afford is massive, and the tickets were just the first barrier. The second thing knocking fans out is travel restrictions. Even if a Brazilian or Senegalese or Iranian fan was willing to pay the ticket prices, getting into the country to actually use that ticket has become significantly harder. Between 65 and 70% of the hotels surveyed are pointing to visa restrictions and broader geopolitical anxiety as the single biggest reason international demand is falling. Four of the qualifying nations, Iran, Haiti, Ivory Coast, and Senegal, have populations facing serious U.S. travel barriers. The U.S. conflict with Iran has made all of it worse, and the AHLA president has publicly cited it as one of the factors slowing bookings. European fans describe the situation the same way: extraordinary prices, unexpected barriers, and a general sense that the tournament wasn't designed with them in mind. European airline bookings to the United States for July are down 14% compared to last year. The sharpest drops are happening in Frankfurt, Barcelona, Amsterdam, Paris, Munich, and Athens, which are exactly the cities where you'd expect the World Cup to be pulling travel demand up rather than down. So when you add all of these forces together, the math becomes brutal for the average fan. A group of 4 people traveling to a single Dallas match is looking at $2,200 a night in hotel costs alone, plus around $10,000 in tickets, plus flights, plus food. When the trip math gets that bad, fans don't just downgrade their hotels, they cancel the entire trip. And those are exactly the customers the hotels were counting on, gone before pricing was ever really a factor in the conversation. But that still doesn't explain everything, because while hotels were sitting empty, somebody else in the lodging business was having a record-breaking month. This is the part of the story that should make every hotel CFO uncomfortable. Remember Houston, where 70% of hotels are calling the tournament a disappointment. If you look at the short-term rental data for the exact same city, you get the opposite picture entirely. Houston's STR fill rate during normal weeks runs around 12%. During match weeks, that fill rate jumps to 35%. That's roughly 4,400 listings booked on peak nights, in a market of about 12,700 total listings. Hotels are calling this a non-event, but Airbnbs are booming. It's the same city, the same World Cup, and the same dates, but two completely different industries are living through two completely different realities, and Airbnb's CEO Brian Chesky made the contrast impossible to ignore. He said that since last fall, about 100,000 new homes had been listed on Airbnb across the 16 host cities, and that the company was expecting record demand. In Airbnb's entire 18-year history, this is the #1 event ever for bookings. 380,000 expected guests. Their projected host earnings for the tournament are around $210 million. And the reason Airbnb is winning this badly comes down to the price gap, which is almost hard to believe when you actually compare the numbers. Take a Dallas match week, for example. A group of 4 fans booking hotels are paying around $2,200 a night for 4 separate rooms. The same group of 4 splitting a single Airbnb pays $340 total for the night. That's $85 per person. If you scale that out to a group of 8 people staying for the full 8 nights of the tournament, the difference becomes enormous. Hotels would cost them $17,600. Airbnb costs them $2,700. Same city, same dates, same World Cup, but a roughly 6.5 times difference in what they end up spending. The fill rate numbers across other host cities tell exactly the same story. In Houston, STR bookings are up 192% over baseline. In Dallas, they're up 187%. Atlanta is up 136%. Airbnb also has a major geographic advantage that hotels can't match. 67% of the zip codes in host cities have Airbnb coverage, while hotels only cover 38%. So Airbnb is cheaper, closer to the stadiums, better suited to group travel, and friendlier to international fans who would rather cook in a kitchen than pay American restaurant prices and navigate the unfamiliar tipping culture. There is essentially no category in which hotels are winning this fight. They are losing on price, on geography, on capacity, and on the kind of traveler the tournament is bringing, all at the same time. So what does all of this actually mean for the hotel industry going forward? It means the old way of thinking about mega events doesn't really work anymore. For decades, hotels approached every major event the same way. A big tournament would come to town, hotels would block off their inventory, raise their rates significantly, and cash in on a guaranteed wave of demand. The 2026 World Cup is the first major event where that approach failed publicly, at scale, and in front of the entire industry at once. Hotels didn't just miss out on the boom they were expecting, they actively lost market share to a competitor that had already been taking customers from them on every normal weekend. And that competitor just had the biggest payday of its existence using the exact same tournament hotels were supposed to dominate. The harder lesson here is that when group travel, international travel, and budget-conscious travel all shift towards short-term rentals at the same time, hotels get left with mostly business travelers and conference guests, and even those two segments have been softening recently. Vancouver's June bookings being down 20% is not really a World Cup story when you think about it. It's a story about the hotel industry slowly losing the customer it used to be able to count on. And fans, the people this entire tournament is supposed to be for, many of them said the same thing, that there's no way they could ever afford to attend without taking out a loan, that everything is just too expensive, that they would rather spend thousands of dollars on their personal needs than on a single game. The prices made it impossible for most of them to even show up. The next time a tourism board promises a hotel boom around a major event, the question every hotel CFO should really be asking is whether they're actually getting that boom or whether Airbnb is getting it. Because in 2026, the answer to that question became impossible to ignore. If you want to understand how hotels actually make their money and why a single empty room costs them more than you would expect, that's going to be the next video on this channel. Subscribe so you catch it when it goes up.